What's up, guys? Eric here, Mr. Fired Up Wealth. Sell all of your Twilio stock and buy bandwidth stock. That's what everybody keeps telling me. Do you believe that? Do you think I believe that? Let's look at both stocks. Let's dig in and find out. All right, guys. So we've had a lot of people actually ask in the Discord group. So if you're not familiar, we have a Patreon, Fired Up Wealth Patreon. There's a Discord. We've had several different people ask me about company called Bandwidth. And Twilio is one of my stock picks. It's one that I own in my portfolio. I've had it for a while. Up nicely on it. I've even been adding it in recent dips. I think it still has long-term potential. But there's obviously some appeal with Bandwidth because it's less expensive. And not only is the stock less expensive, the actual products and services are less expensive than Twilio. And a lot of people think that it could be a good alternative. And you see a lot of articles. I've seen several articles that have been shared in Discord that are basically saying you should buy Bandwidth and sell Twilio. This video is basically to help explain what each company is, what their strengths and weaknesses are, and which one is the better of the two as a long-term hold in your stock portfolio. So to get started, we're going to look at first, what is platform as a service? Because both of these companies, both Twilio and Bandwidth, they focus on platform as a service, which you could also call PaaS. Platform as a service, PaaS, is a complete development environment in the cloud that enables developers to add specific communication features like messaging, voice, and video to their applications. Okay, so you purchase resources based on your requirements from a cloud service provider on a pay-as-you-go basis, having accessibility over a fully secured internet connection. Just one quick example is Twilio with something like a company called Lyft. You've all heard of Lyft, like, competitor to Uber. With Lyft, they use Twilio, and whenever you schedule a Lyft, you get like a direct message, you get a text message, what have you. That's all done through the Twilio platform as a service. So Bandwidth, let's first talk about Bandwidth and what the company is, a little background about the company. So it's headquartered in Raleigh, North Carolina. The stock ticker is BAND. It's a cloud-based communications platform as a service company. So they call themselves a CPaaS. So it's still platform as a service, but they call it a communications platform as a service, which essentially both of these companies are communications platform as a service. It offers a wide range of VoIP communication services. That's voice over internet protocol, VoIP communication services. The company primarily serves wholesale and retail businesses, and they are a global business. Band was founded in 1991. It works globally with renowned industry giants such as Google, GoDaddy, Skype, Arlo, Rover, and more. And I'll show you some of the customers here later on a different slide. So the service highlights for Bandwidth: they have two-way messaging solutions for on-demand applications, customer care, collaboration apps, and more. Integrated phone numbers, ordering, and porting functionality within your applications. SIP trunking services for VoIP enabled desk phones, soft phones, and more. We'll talk about what SIP trunking is here in a couple of seconds. SMS and MMS enabled phone numbers ready for next generation business communications. SMS notifications, reminders, alerts, and more with reliable and dependable delivery. They also have 911 routing solutions for next-gen mobile apps and employees. And they have enterprise 911 to deliver pinpoint accuracy. So they are very much focused on, the phone over internet, basically. Those type of services is primarily their focus. So both of these companies do similar things, but Twilio has some additional services. So let's talk about Twilio. So Twilio is headquartered in San Francisco. It's San Francisco. So one's in San Francisco, one's in Raleigh. I used to go to Raleigh a lot because my previous company I worked for, their headquarters is in Raleigh. So I'm familiar with, I used to go there several times a year. And, it does have a little bit of a tech hub, so to speak. I mean, Indianapolis is another place, has a few businesses there, but nothing like San Francisco, of course. For the most part, it's been historically, if you're not located in San Francisco, it's harder to compete. It's not always the case, but you look at like a Limelight Networks, they're based in Arizona. versus a Cloudflare, that's based in San Francisco. So it can give, at least some people think it can give you a little bit of an edge. There's certainly, the cream of the crop with developers. That is changing though, especially with COVID. More people are moving away from, different cities and more expensive cities and higher tax cities and things like that. So who knows? I mean, Texas seems like it's becoming the new California. I know some of you listening probably are either happy or unhappy about that, but that's a whole political story that we won't get into. Twilio, like Bandwidth, is also one of the leading cloud computing communications platform as a service. So they call themselves more of a PaaS, but they're both CPaaS. And they focus primarily on communication services, but they do have some parts of their business that are outside of that. Twilio provides APIs for sending, receiving, and tracking text messages. So if you're not familiar with APIs, just think of it as a way for different software to basically communicate to help make things easier. So additionally, Twilio allows you to test your SMS-enabled applications within a sandbox environment. Twilio has also put in speech recognition, making it possible to translate a user's voice into text, which is pretty handy. Twilio also offers a software layer for connecting and optimizing communication networks globally. Okay, some service highlights for Twilio, just like we did for Bandwidth. Well-built, extremely reliable. It's very rare to have any reliability issues. Very simple to configure multiple accounts. Send and receive text messages with APIs powering 65 billion. I think the number was 66 billion. I think it's probably more than that, but over 65 billion messages per year. That's a lot of messages. Advanced call control for real-time APIs to receive, initiate, and control calls. Convert speech to text with the ability to analyze its intent during any voice call. Route calls from your existing VIOP infrastructure to Twilio for programmatic call control without the need to migrate hardware or carriers. That's very handy. Instantly acquire local, national, mobile, and toll-free numbers in more than 100 countries with only one single API. And use your existing toll-free number or a new Twilio number that you can get in the United States, the United Kingdom, or in Canada. Okay, so let's do a comparison. So both of them they're globally known, they're globally renowned cloud business platform as a service, PaaS or CPaaS companies, as well as SIP trunk providers offering software APIs for both voice and messaging. Okay, so they do similar things in that aspect. If you don't understand what SIP trunking is, here's a good diagram that shows you. So in the middle here, you've got the SIP trunk. That's the business network of the LAN, right? And it's pushing it out to a server, and the server's pushing it out to your laptop, to your phone, your tablet, all those things on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side of the business LAN, you have a router, internet, you got the voice over internet protocol, and then you got the telephone network, okay? So this is basically allowing, the definition here, SIP trunk is the virtual version of an analog phone line. It's as simple as that. Using SIP trunks, an SIP provider can connect 1, 2, or 20 channels to your PBX, allowing you to make local, long distance, and international calls over the internet. So this seems, pretty straightforward. It's pretty cool stuff. So what else? So we've got Bandwidth provides a complete range of voice over internet protocol communication solutions. Band primarily focused on global wholesale and retail businesses. So that's their focus. They're focusing mostly on that global wholesale and retail businesses, where Twilio is much more diverse with the customers it's focused on. Now that could change, of course, but that's really where Bandwidth had a niche, and they played off it, and they've done well in those spaces. Band is associated with large players like Google. Bandwidth, there's other ones too I'm going to mention in a minute. So Bandwidth is the only API platform provider and a top SIP trunk service provider that has a tier 1 network. So that's important. So here are some of the customers. So Google, Microsoft, there's Zoom, RingCentral, Rover, Genesys, Arlo, some big names here that are using Bandwidth, okay, which is great. Now, Twilio's deals in complex underlying communication functions into APIs, which enable software developers and organizations to create, host, and deploy communications applications. So Twilio has also been a top choice for cloud-based communication APIs. It's really been best of breed for several years. If you ask anybody, they'll say, developers, they love Twilio. It's really simple to use. You need far less code, things like that. Okay, so let's look at some Twilio customers because they have quite a bit larger list than what we just looked at with Bandwidth. So I'm going to show you that. Okay, you can see here, explore what 150,000 of your peers from startups to global enterprises. So a lot of companies use Twilio. They've been around for a while. They've been crushing it for a while. over 150,000 customers from Lyft, Chime, American Red Cross, Stripe. We've got Airbnb, Coca-Cola, just on and on and on. Boxes on here, VMware, Salesforce, Yelp, Twitch, EMC, Twitter, Trulia. I mean, these guys are big. Uber, on and on and on. You can see all of them on your screen here. UC San Diego's on there. I mean, very diverse customer list, you know, LendingTree, eBay, SurveyMonkey, on and on and on. So you can say, well, you know, these guys have a lot of customers, but I want to buy Bandwidth stock because they could, you know, win more business going forward, and, you know, they're cheaper and things like that. But sometimes you have to be careful with that, because best of breed sometimes remains best of breed, right? And Twilio is actually, they've been acquiring other companies trying to grow out their different services. And so when you think of, you know, when you think of business this size, it's very easy, if they've got good relationships with customers, to expand their footprint within a customer. That's something that I used to work at Oracle, and Oracle acquired lots of companies, and you basically had a relationship. You already had an ERP, it was PeopleSoft, whatever. And you would, you know, basically Oracle would acquire these companies, these different edge apps like GRC and Agile and all these different products, you know, BI, and try to upsell the customer and cross-sell and expand the footprint. So, you know, Twilio has a really huge customer base of happy customers that they could tap into. I mean, look at this. I'm still scrolling. It's massive. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on. Some of the companies I've never even heard of, but there's a lot of really big names in here too. And, you know, it's just Realtor.com uses them. There's, you know, Zendesk. You know, Melly's on here. It says here protects 90% of sellers with Twilio. There's, I mean, just on and on and on. You can come, you know, Dido's on here. There's just a ton of companies. But, you know, a lot of times best of breed keeps being best of breed. Okay, let's do a side-by-side comparison of Bandwidth and Twilio to get a better idea. So Bandwidth, full suite of voice over internet protocol communication services focused on wholesale and retail businesses globally. It's important to remember that that has been their focus historically. So that could change in the future, but as an investor, you need to know that they have been focused on wholesale and retail businesses, okay? That's been their niche. Full suite of cloud-ready voice, messaging, and 911, as well as APIs. They own all of their IP voice over networks, which is important to note, and they are less expensive than Twilio. Not only the stock price, but if you actually buy one of the services, it's going to be less expensive to use Bandwidth for your company than it is Twilio. Twilio primarily focuses on communication services. It offers APIs to programmatically send, receive, and track text messages all over the world. Users can test SMS-enabled applications within a sandbox environment. A lot of developers like that. They have a wide range of services outweighing those offered by Bandwidth. So they are more diverse. They have more services than Bandwidth offers. Both do offer a competitive range of communication services for voice and messaging, but Twilio has more to offer, and also they're a lot simpler because they use less lines of code. So next I'm actually going to show you the stock prices and charts. All right, let's look at the stocks and let's look at some charts and kind of break down a few different things. So first off, Twilio's market cap is almost $55 billion. So it's quite a bit larger than Bandwidth. Bandwidth is actually $3.86 billion market cap. You can see, according at least to TradingView, the earnings per share is negative 1.09 for Bandwidth, and it's actually negative as well for Twilio of 2.83. Okay, so these guys aren't profitable. They're growth companies. They're turning and burning. They're burning through cash. They're still trying to grow. If you look at recent growth, so this is Twilio you see on your screen here. Now, the last quarter, the Q3 2020, if you look at the year over year, it was up about 52%. Net profit margin was negative 26%. The quarter before that, 45.74% positive on the year over year revenue change, and then negative almost 25% profit margin. 56 and 25, 62 and 27. So, you know, some decent growth, but, you know, obviously the net profit margin is not really there. Let's look at Bandwidth and see. So this one now, they've got 40% on the growth revenue year over year, and that profit margin is only negative 2.77%. Now here you got, you know, this is a really bad quarter in my opinion, 35% and negative 26%. This one's 28% positive, you know, just 1.5% negative on the profit margin. This one here is 18 and -3. So, if you look at this last quarter, you could see why a lot of articles are coming out saying, this is better. So let's look at this the last quarter. So 40% and -2.7 and 62, but then they have -27. Okay, so this isn't a SaaS company, so you wouldn't necessarily do rule of 40, but if you were just doing that to humor me or myself or whatever, 38 on this one. And, if you did some quick math on this one, it's a little bit less, 35, something like that. So they're not really that far off, but obviously the big difference, Twilio was founded in San Francisco in 2008. When you think of Bandwidth, they've been around since 1999. So for me as an investor, I look at a lot of different things, and I just released, or tomorrow I'll be releasing a new video, a masterclass series. So if you're a Patreon member and you're elite or VIP, I've got a masterclass series that goes into really deep dive information on how to be a long-term investor, and basically trying to teach all the tricks of the trades that I've learned over the last 20 years. And if you're not familiar with me or the channel, I manage a multi-million-dollar portfolio of my own, and I've been investing for over 20 years. And so this last video, we talk about, qualitative and quantitative analysis, looking not only at numbers, but also like big picture things in economics. So one thing that I like to look at with a stock, and now you can say that, all you care about is where a stock's going, not where it's been. But if a company's been around since 1999, okay, like Bandwidth, and they're only, a $3.8 billion market cap company, why is that? Okay. Twilio has been around since 2008, so it's 9 years younger, and we're talking about a $58 billion market cap. So, Twilio basically came to the market almost a decade after Bandwidth, and 58 billion versus 3 billion. I mean, you know what I mean? So they're definitely, you cannot question that Twilio is best of breed. Twilio hasn't been around nearly as long as Bandwidth, and they're way larger, way more customers, way bigger market cap, more sales, all those different things. So you need to think about the big picture too. Like, sure, you can go buy a stock because it's underpriced and it's not as expensive, but is that the only reason to buy the stock? So I won't give you my full analysis yet. I want to look at some charts, but that's just some food for thought for you here. So let's look at Twilio just from the short-term basis. I mean, if you look at some technicals on something like Twilio, the 200-day moving average is $254. It's trading at 362, so it's extended. I'm not necessarily saying you should go buy, Twilio. You could argue that if you were going to buy Twilio or Bandwidth right here, which one should you buy? Maybe Bandwidth will outperform Twilio. I'm not necessarily saying that's not true, but you also have to, think about which stock you want to own long term. So, and maybe you can own both in your portfolio. It really depends on the person and what your portfolio looks like, your goals, all those different things. So if we look at a full featured chart of Twilio, now this is just looking at some pivot points here. We're going to go a 3-month chart, 1-hour candles. We're using the pivot points. You can get down to the templates, swing trading. This is just to get an idea of where a stock could possibly go on these pivot points. So, I mean, it's, made a big run, kind of pulled back. It's kind of, making a nice little run again. I mean, maybe you can get it under 350. It's a good deal, but I wouldn't say a good deal, but it's, it's better than where it's priced at now. But, you probably want it to come down quite a bit. It would have been better to obviously buy it back here. It's kind of, made a little bit of a run. So, the stock is somewhat expensive right here. So Bandwidth, obviously the technicals on here say sell, but you don't buy or sell based on that. Strong sell. This thing looks like it's breaking down a little bit. So it's doing the opposite. This is actually down 0.73%. And, Twilio is actually up 0.75%. Okay. So that's something as an investor, like, wonder why that is. Maybe it's just random. Well, this one says, strong sell. It doesn't, again, you don't buy or sell based on these wheels, but it's good to note them. The simple 200-day moving average is 137. It's trading at 154. So it's a little above, but not by, nearly as much as what we saw, with Twilio. So let's look at a full featured chart. Same thing. We're going to look at 3 months and we're going to look at 1-hour candles. So this is a 3-month chart, 1 hour candles on a 3-month chart. And this is kind of pulling back down to this $153 range. So, it actually ran up, and the reason it ran up is because it got pumped. And, there were some articles saying it was a better buy than Twilio, and, made the stock run. That's my speculation anyway. And then it's pulled down, here. So maybe it's a decent buy in this range, and maybe this company will continue to grow. But, you got to also keep things in perspective. Why did the stock run in the first place? Did it run because, a couple analysts, basically said it was a buy and that's better than Twilio? Do they really understand, the people writing those articles, do they truly understand what the two companies do and how different they are? Sometimes I question that. It makes me go back to Fastly and Cloudflare. You get people comparing those companies all the time, and they both do CDNs, and they have some similarities. They're very, very different companies. But you always see people comparing them, like all CDNs are the same, or the same with Twilio and Bandwidth. I think they do similar things, but they're different in the same way that a Cloudflare and a Fastly is different. Okay, so real quick, I want to show you the price to sales ratio for the two stocks. And this will definitely prove that Bandwidth is less expensive for sure. I mean, in comparison, right? So Bandwidth is, if this is just on Y charts, this is a historical PS ratio data here on the chart, but the data for the date range it shows right here, January 11th, it's showing 12.74 price to sales, okay? The price to sales ratio is calculated by taking the stock price divided by revenue per share, all right? This metric is considered a valuation metric that confirms whether the sales of a company justifies the stock price. You use it a lot of times for growth stocks. So that is Band. Band is 12.74. Twilio, price to sales ratio, 33.23. So in theory, Twilio's quite a bit more expensive, 12 versus 33. That's why a lot of people, you might read articles saying, buy Bandwidth because it's a third of the price and it does the same thing. That's kind of where they're getting it from. So it is true that the stock is cheaper. Sometimes that's an opportunity as an investor. Sometimes there's a reason for it. Okay, so verdict. What do I think? So Bandwidth and Twilio, they're both globally renowned cloud-based platform as a service companies, as well as SIP trunk providers. Both claim to offer the best-in-class services in their respective domains. Specific business needs may sway decisions for businesses either direction. So depending on the need of your business, you may pick one over the other. Sometimes fulfilling requirements and best of breed is more important than price. So some businesses might pay a little bit more knowing it's best of breed, or that, customer service is better, what have you. And you'd have to look at the rankings and see which one you think is better for your specific business. But I want you to remember that these companies do similar things, but they are different. They're very different, both market cap, their history, even the products and services they offer. So, I think it's a decent comparison when you say, yes, you could use certain functions of Bandwidth instead of Twilio. But is it truly the same company? Is it truly a competitor in every area? No, it's not. It just isn't. And if anybody's watching this that, is offended by that, I'm sorry, but there are things that Twilio can do and do better, and they require less code, and they're best of breed, and they're killing it, and they're going to probably keep killing it, because most of the time, in my experience, been doing this a long time, the best of breed, keeps being best in breed. And I'm not saying that you can't make money on Bandwidth. They probably can both survive, but it's just something to keep in mind. So Twilio has more to offer, has more customers, has more experience, and it is considered best of breed. You ask any developer, they're going to tell you that they're going to prefer Twilio, over a Bandwidth, and that's just facts. So Band stock price is less expensive, and there's probably room for both of these stocks and both of these companies to do well. So if you own Bandwidth, it could probably do well, and maybe Bandwidth will outperform. And here's the risk when making a video like this. 3 months from now, you're going to go, oh, Bandwidth is up 20% and Twilio is only up 12%. We won't know the story for years, like 5 years from now, which one. Now, as an investor, there can be some attraction to smaller cap stocks because they have more room to run. There's more risk, more reward. A lot of times what people will say though is, well, this stock, this company is only $3 billion. It should be at least 20 billion because Twilio is 50 billion. So, the stock's going to, literally it's going to go up times 5 because, or 7 or whatever the number is, or 6, because it has to, has to be at least half the size of Twilio. So I'm just going to buy it because it's 3 billion now, and I think it should be 15 or 20 billion. So that means the stock price is going to go up, and I'm going to make a lot of money. Well, that can be true, but it's not always true. So just be careful with that. Understand what you're buying, understand the risk with a smaller cap stock like that. A $3 billion or $4 billion market cap stock is a lot different than, a Twilio that's much, much larger. So there's gonna be more volatility, probably more risk reward with a bandwidth. If you're one of the people that like to invest in best of breed, Twilio is the best of breed. But it doesn't, like for example, I own Zillow Group. I like Zillow Group. I also own Opendoor. And Opendoor, I do not think is better than Zillow Group in terms of best of breed. But I think that there's enough total addressable market that Opendoor can still do well as a stock. And that's kind of the same thing with bandwidth. I do think that both stocks can do well. I think, you could buy the stock and be happy with the performance. I think it does have some very promising growth perspectives if they could keep the track that they're on, and they could keep, improving their businesses and their services. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity with bandwidth, and you could speculate that you could make a lot more money with the stock, but it depends on the person. If you like best of breed, and, or you think, well, Twilio is kind of not that great anymore. It's going to be obsolete in 2 years, so I'm going to buy bandwidth. You might think that. I don't think that. I own Twilio bandwidth. If it came down, maybe if it came down 10% or something on a sale, if the market sold off, maybe I add a few shares, but it's not something I'm going to rush out and buy right now. So again, if you own the stock or if you believe in the stock, this is not meant to upset you or anything. I'm just giving you my perspective, and that's all it is. So, don't hate me or the video because of that. I'm saying that both stocks can do well and that both companies can do well. If you have not subscribed, please do hit the subscribe button. Please like the video. It helps the algorithm a lot. Please do comment, give me some feedback, share the video, stop by the Facebook group, stop by Patreon. I appreciate your time and attention. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.